To know if a girl's into you, the first thing is...
Don't care. Anyways, today we're finding out what the worst class in Team Fortress 2 is. In order to determine which class has the least amount of aura, we first need to establish some sort of metric to measure each class by. The two main things I'll be looking at are A, what is their class capable of, i.e. area denial, healing, picks, and compare that to the other. For example, healing will be a much better class function than flanking. And B, how effective they are at doing their class function. Another example would be if the class who's supposed to be good at healing actually sucks and the flanker is like super good and constantly sending people behind and away from the front line to go search for him, then the flanker would actually be better than the healer. But in Team Fortress 2, there is this ever looming thought of competitive and how things work at the highest level of play. While comp players do know how to play each class to their maximum potential at the highest skill ceiling, it's usually not how they're meant to be played, or at least not how 99.9% of people play the class, nor are able to. And it would be pretty unfair to judge a class how a very small group of players use that class, but at the same time, that very small group of players sets an example of how you should play each class. Just look at literally any esport. Everyone's just copying what the pros do. So instead of completely disregarding how casuals play the game and only caring about competitive players, or vice versa, I'll be equally taking into account each playstyle and role that both groups have for a class. Fair? Fair. I'll go down the list of classes and what I personally think are the best to worst, starting off with a class that I think a whopping 0 people will disagree with, and that is Medic. The only time Medic can be considered not the best class is right after an Uber when he's at 0% charge and in the middle of a team fight, because his healing then is not very valuable since nobody has crit heals and his single target healing output isn't really enough to save people in a significant manner. That's why in competitive during a post-Uber fight and your team isn't worrying about securing that Uber percent advantage against the other team after the fight, he's usually the last person you're gonna go after, just because of how little impact he has on the fight. But other than that one very specific scenario, he's the best class at all times pretty much. In casual, if your team has a medic and the other team doesn't, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the round unless everyone on your team are fresh installs or you got the classic 3 spies, 2 snipers, and your one heaviest AFK in spawn. Medic's healing output makes it so that your team doesn't have to run back to constantly get health packs or wait at a dispenser. Your team is able to stay at that front line and gradually take more and more space against the other team until you're ready to go in for an Uber. And I feel like I don't really have to explain how good Ubers are, so let's just move on to the next class. This is definitely where things begin to get a little controversial. The second best class in Team Fortress 2 has got to be Demoman. He's just such an influential class in the big 3, Casuals, Sixes, and Highlander. You can never group up when one of these guys is around, in fear of just instantly getting deleted to 2 pipes. Most team fights in this game happen at a medium range, which is his most effective range. He has the second best long range damage output in the game, second only to Sniper, and no other class really has long range capabilities like a flat 100 damage pipe across the map. Yes, it can be luck, but that spam does make room for your team, and if you charge stickies effectively, you can actually get some pretty good kills at long range with Demo. His burst damage is just insane. He can completely stop a team's momentum with one sticky trap. He can pretty much shut down certain chokes and areas all by himself with his spam. He has great mobility and is very capable of one-on-ones. I know the Demoman glazing is a little insane right now, but he's just such a good class with too many things he's good at that are all very applicable in casual and competitive, unlike certain classes' positives being basically useless in certain modes, which we'll get to later. 2 pipes or 0.6 seconds is all it takes to kill a light class and leave everyone else around them low. And of course, it takes skill to do this, but in those upper level lobbies, pretty much every Demoman makes your local pipe demon look like a toddler. Not to mention how crucially underutilized sticky bombs are. People either leave a dent in their left mouse button from clicking at 30 CPS from sticky spamming, or either die of old age when waiting for a single free-to-play scout to walk past their trap. There's so many ways to use sticky bombs that are very unique and 5-head ways that I should just leave it up to someone else to do the talking for me. And that someone is Wild Rumpus. I swear every video he uploads is like a new revelation to my Team Fortress 2 knowledge, especially since I'm a predominantly Highlander player. I would say he's very underrated, but he kind of has like triple my subs, so check him out after this vid if you have the time. He'll be linked below. But yeah, combine everything I said, plus a few Wild Rumpus videos, and you'll see my case for why Demo's ranked the way he is. Now, these next 3 classes are all very interchangeable, whether you mostly play Sixes, Highlander, or Casual, but nonetheless, they're all relatively speaking in the upper half of classes apart from Medic. But to me personally, Scout is number 3, which may come as a surprise to many people because he's pretty booty cheeks and casual at a lower level. But that all hinges on the player's own skill. Like almost every other combat class in the game, he can 2-tap everything but a heavy, but excluding Demo, they all have to be super close to their target to deal that kind of damage, and they typically can't get close without taking some kind of damage and then have an even even harder time getting out if they don't have teammates around. But Scout, with that 133% movement speed and double jump, has kind of no problem getting super close to a target without them knowing or them knowing, 2-tapping them and then getting out right after. His mobility doesn't rely on taking self damage either, so that means if you see a Scout, he can probably get into that 2-tap range very quickly, and is extremely threatening because of that. It's why you see him in almost every Uber exchange in competitive. Being that fast with such high burst damage makes it so that anyone near him that isn't Ubered is at threat of just getting instantly 2-tapped out of existence. It puts a lot of pressure on the enemy team's medic to keep everyone else flashed, which ultimately lowers their Uber duration, so a Scout is very threatening in the right hands. It's why Scout and Demo Ubers are the way to go, bread and butter for almost every competitive team. But in casual, Scout is a very different story. He's most certainly not the best 1v1 class, unlike in competitive, because most Scouts in casual don't have their movement and aim locked in yet. Because when you do, Scout doesn't really seem to have a losing matchup. They're all either winning or neutral. But in casual, Scouts seem to consistently lose to everyone that aren't snipers, spies, and NGs without a sentry. Oh yeah, sentries. These could just make the game outright unplayable as Scout. If you were planning on playing Scout on attack defend or payload offense, just don't. The only kills you're going to get are on people on defense trying to flank your team, and I would honestly argue that Scout isn't even a top 5 class if we're strictly looking at casual. And that's not even including his busted weapons that just nobody seems to know how to use. Scout certainly has potential to be one of the upper end classes in casual, given how many random 1v1s are always taking place across a game of 24 players. But most Scouts in casual are spending most of their time on the respawn timer, so it's kind of hard to justify them being better than Demo. But still, the impact he has on a game that is at the upper level of play is just too much to ignore. So I got him at number 3. Sniper and Soldier are extremely interchangeable, and where you place them is going to heavily depend on what you think of Sniper and him being overpowered or not. I know it's oversimplifying it a lot, but generally speaking, Sniper is just better in Highlander and Soldier's better in 6s, so they're somewhat even in the comp department, which mainly just leaves who's better in casual. Soldier is a class that can provide value to his team in many different ways, whether it be giving his team positive effects with his banners, bombing in to make space and get picks, or just dealing a shit ton of damage. Sniper, on the other hand, gets kills.
And he was very good at it.
I know this is summing up the Sniper OP debate a lot, but he isn't that hard to counter. Just send a spy or sniper after them, and then they're just kind of cooked if they don't make themselves obvious. And if you can't get them because they're sitting in a sentry nest, that's just where your team has to Uber anyways to get through to the next point. Like, it'll happen naturally throughout the course of the game. As long as your medic doesn't wander into their sight line for 40 seconds, you'll be fine and get that Uber off. Obviously, that's a little easier said than done on a map like Whatville, but if you really want to counter them, a battalions is a great idea for when you want to challenge them yourself, or just any kind of sneaky flank class can get the job done. Or you yourself could just go medic and build an Uber. Like, if it's bothering you that much, you could just go medic and stop blaming everyone else on your team. I know people are gonna make the argument like, oh, this shouldn't be like Overwatch where it's a rock, paper, scissors. If there's one class dominating, you shouldn't have to switch classes to counter that class. But, I mean, whenever there's a top-scoring spy, you go Pyro. Whenever there's a top-scoring heavy, you go Sniper. Whenever there's a top-scoring scout, you go NG. Like, it's not uncommon to counterpick in Team Fortress 2 to counter a very good person on the enemy team. But Soldier, on the other hand, doesn't really have a good way to counter him. Any fight he doesn't want to take, he can usually just jump out. His biggest threat, being Pyro, is actually not that hard to counter with a shotgun. And I typically just walk at them and wait for them to do a preemptive air blast and then just shoot after. It's pretty easy to do. The only time it doesn't work is when I'm starting the fight pretty low, and they can just kill me with a few puffs of flame. But what makes Soldier so much more of a threat than Sniper is that he isn't locked into one position. Soldier can really be anywhere in just a few seconds if you're good enough, versus a Sniper that's locked into the nest he's playing in or be vulnerable. But Soldier is comfortable just about anywhere, and a Soldier in equivalent skill to a Sniper that shuts down the server is just gonna turn that same server into a pile of mush of guts. So I personally have Soldier as number 4 and Sniper at 5. A Soldier that's new to the game is also going to do a lot better than a newbie Sniper. And even when both a Soldier and Sniper are performing really well, I feel like the Soldier still has more potential than a Sniper. Not to mention, your team actually has the confidence to go in when they see a Soldier just clapping cheeks on the front line. Like, when you get a bunch of kills as Sniper, no one really notices and your team doesn't push in. But if you see your Soldier just walking at the other team, getting kills and going to their spawn, your team's gonna follow them and actually capture the point. Versus Sniper, where everyone's just gonna dilly-daddle around for someone else to go in. But that's just me. I know I skipped a lot in that we didn't even talk about quickscoping, so if you guys want to see a whole video dedicated to Sniper, let me know in the comments below. This next one is going to be very controversial, and I genuinely thought about this for a while, and as much as I would like to put them as a tie, I gotta put NG in the number 6 spot. Sorry Heavy, maybe next time. They're both off classes in 6s, and they both play pretty similar in Highlander as they do in casual. Engineer's supporting options just offer so much more to a team, especially one without a medic. The teleporter quickly brings people back that would have lived if there was a medic. The saying doesn't really reign true in competitive, but in casual, teleporters win games. Even when a medic isn't cutting it, dispensers make it so people don't have to retreat all the way back to a health pack or their spawn just to get ammo and health, and let people keep up the pressure on the front lines. And his sentry provides a really good backup option to players retreating from a fight or to help fend off incoming Ubers. Engineer works very well on offense and defense. An NG with a mini on his side and a minimum 60% shotgun accuracy is going to win a large majority of his engagements in pubs. On top of all that utility his dispenser and teleporter provide on defense, stacking 3+ NGs on a payload map is pretty much guaranteed to win unless the other team stacks a bunch of medics and explosive classes. But even just one engineer properly maintaining his nest on defense is enough to give his team enough room to shut down an entire match by facing those fallback options in his sentry and dispenser and frontline replenishment with his teleporter. It definitely doesn't reflect it on the scoreboard, but engineers can and very oftentimes do carry games without people noticing. I honestly wish I could place almost all these classes higher up because they're all super good. Just because I'm placing NG and Heavy so low doesn't mean that they're bad classes by any means. Just compared to the other classes, if I had to put them on a list, this is where they would be. Last of what I would consider of the good classes is my GOAT Pudis. I know putting him this far down on the list may seem criminal to some, but his lack of mobility in a game where people can fly and sprint 24/7, Heavy's type 2 ass ain't cutting it. I'm sorry, don't get me wrong, in a one-on-one, Heavy beats just about any class in a lower to mid skill level environment, and stacking 3 to 4 heavies on a payload results in a roll 99% of the time. Other than that, his strengths are just kinda waiting for people to come to him on defense or getting Ubered on offense. Unless you're running Banana and Tomislav on the flank or have a medic shoved up your booty hole 24/7, it's hard to find meaningful value as Heavy. In 6s he's an off class, but in Highlander he's great in post Ubers as well as denying bombers, flankers, and spies, but other than that he's mostly just a damage sponge. I love Heavy, I even got both his Australians and that chalky sandwich, but amongst all the other classes, measuring up to what he brings to the table and what that thing is, it just doesn't stack up to the rest of the roster. Don't get me wrong, a 300 health wall with weapons like a minigun is super good. It's just everything else is better. But when I say NG can press 2 on his keyboard and conjure the same thing for a medium ammo box, Heavy kind of falls off. Again, I like Heavy, but amongst the other good classes, he definitely falls short. Real quick guys, we're almost at 3,000 subs and a very small percentage of you guys are actually subscribed, so if I've earned the right to your subscription, it would mean a lot to me if you guys hit that button. It's totally free and you can change your mind anytime. Thanks, and let's get back to it. And now we get to the part you've all been waiting for. Who's worse, Pyro or Spy? I feel like these two classes are a very special case for the rules we've established. Spy is bad at doing his class role, being getting picks, and Pyro doesn't really have something they're super good at, or at least something that their class is meant to do. Like medic heals, scout flanks, and takes on 1v1s, Pyro just kind of exists, sort of dipping their toes into everyone else's expertise but never really committing to something. Like they do well in close range engagements, pestering people at long range and protecting buildings and allies, but apart from that there isn't really much Pyro can do. When it comes to fighting up close, it's pretty hard to output a shotgun shoved in your face compared to a flamethrower. If Pyro's health was buffed up to 200, they could easily dominate one-on-ones and win more often. You could get fancy with it, light them on fire, air blast them away, and hit them with a flare or shotgun shot to take on light classes, but against demos, soldiers, heavies, and other Pyros, it just doesn't cut it. And if you're fighting someone other than a soldier or demo that has a basic understanding of Pyro's range, you're limited to only using your secondary, and if that fight starts at mid-range, any class can just back up against you and shoot you while you walk at them in a straight line, and you're gonna die 90% of the time. The only caveat being if they're shooting pipes or rockets at you and you can reflect them, or you have some sort of mobility to catch up to them, but typically by the time you pull it out and take damage and get close, you're already below half while they're still at full, and Pyro's mobility options aren't the greatest. He can't really attack while utilizing his mobility options versus a soldier who can jump and shoot in the air. If Pyro had a faster than average base speed, then he could make up for that weakness. They would only really have a problem with Scout, and Pyro could be a very viable one-on-one class. But you would have to do something like nerf his air blast by lowering the firing speed or take away his mini crits. Pyro's long range also leaves a lot to be desired. Yes, technically one scorch shot hit kills a light class, but it really depends on if the closest health pack was just recently taken, or if there's no medics or dispensers around either. But other than that, you're not really going to accomplish much without that kind of luck. Other than snipers, 2-tapping someone with a flare gun is very hard to pull off at long distance, especially since they can just hide behind cover until the afterburn wears off, and then now you gotta hit them 3 times in a row without them getting some kind of healing. But you know, that's fine. The class excels at close range and isn't really expected to do good at long range. But it's another thing that Pyro can do but is not good at, which kind of just muffles their class a bit. In terms of what Pyro does in competitive, and in my opinion what he's best at, is protecting teammates and buildings. Air Blast is so good at protecting things. It's why you keep your Pyro next to your medic 99% of the time. He's just the best class at being a bodyguard. Yes, Heavy is also good at it, but he can't really retreat when he's protecting, and Pyro's Air Blast can reflect projectiles or push back players so their shots have more fall off, versus Heavy, who has to absorb that damage and can't really keep up with retreating teammates while returning fire. It's why you see Pyros having very little kills, but also very few deaths in competitive. They're just busy protecting people and not going for kills, but they provide so much value to their team doing that, because that's just his best niche. It's certainly a good niche, but that niche doesn't really turn the tides of a game. Moving on to Spy. What Spy brings to the table is very valuable. He can insta-kill, just like Sniper, disable and destroy buildings, 3-tap light classes with his revolver, and give info to his team. Those are some very good things, but how good is he actually at doing them? Giving info is very good in competitive, but it's just non-existent in casual. If you start calming in a casual game, people will not be very happy with you.
Alright guys, they're on the cart, they're going backwards right now.
Shut the fuck up.
Spy's gun is definitely underrated, but I genuinely can't remember the last time I've been 3-tapped in casual by a Spy. Almost nobody has to aim for it. If I had to guess, Spies in casual have about a 40 to 30% revolver accuracy. Of course, you get your ambi Spies that seemingly hit all their headshots, but those are very few and far between, and you can't really measure the class by those people. Now, sapping and disabling buildings is very good, but 99% of the time, you're on a solo mission doing that. Your team is almost never going to go off of you sapping a building. If you want your team to be involved, you have to sap it when they go in. And even then, they can just chicken out and not see what you sapped and just bait you. Sapping is a solo mission a very large majority of the time, and when you do pull it off, all it takes is another engineer or Pyro with a home record to completely undo all of your progress. Because if you get a sap off on a well-placed nest, that nest is most likely near their team, so you're probably gonna not be living that encounter. And all that was just for nothing. And lastly, his insta-kills. You have to put in so much effort to get worse results than a sniper. Think about it. Sniper has to go from spawn, walk behind his team, then boom, he can just start clicking heads with the safety of his team. Spy has to get in behind the enemy team undetected, which can be almost impossible depending on the map. Pick the right disguise, decloak in a spot where you won't be seen, fool the enemy team with your disguise, actually get a stab, and get away without being killed. Versus a sniper who's just been pissing in jars, getting kills unharmed type. I definitely see a lot of Spies top scoring, but they get double points for backstabs, and sapping a level 1 telly that's still under construction counts as a point too, so the game kinda just over exaggerates your impact as a Spy. I've had games where I almost have double a Spy's kills, but they're outscoring me. It's crazy. Spy definitely has the potential to be a good class, whether it be a speed or health buff, just a little something would be nice for him, you know? But you also gotta be careful with what you give him, because if you make his primary too strong or give him too much health, he'll just become a DM class that decloaks on you without any of the skill or timing of disguises and just kills you and runs away. You could just imagine it being like a scout with invisibility. It will be crazy. So you definitely have to walk a thin line when discussing Spy's balancing. So where does that leave us? Spy is supposed to be super good at espionage, but the skill to payoff ratio is just so out of whack and unbalanced. And Pyro has a bunch of things that they could be good at, but just kinda suck at. But there's still a couple things we haven't talked about. Starting with the flog, whenever people who don't know comp are talking to me about weapon bans, the flog always comes up assuming it's banned along with the Kritzkrieg and Holiday Punch, but they're just, they just aren't, because they're not overpowered. To my knowledge, there's no official competitive league that has ever banned these weapons before, the entirety of Team Fortress 2's history. The flog is just really underwhelming against players who are communicating and keeping track of a flog user's meter, who also coincidentally know how to walk backwards. And competitive players also tend to play on balanced maps that aren't just one tiny little lane. But even in casual, there's options to counter a flog, whether it be knockback or just outright out-damaging it at a medium range. The only place the flog is viable in competitive is right here on offense. The best place to hold on second Swiftwater is up here on the high ground, which is perfect for the flog. You start all your engagements at super close range since the door is one way, but it's still overshadowed by a soldier running Beggar's Bazooka and Man Shreds. Yes, really. That's the meta right now in Swiftwater. It's a whole explanation, so if you want to see a video explaining all of competitive TF2's weird yet effective strategies, let me know in the comments below. I think it could be a cool video. But lastly, my favorite Pyro weapon takes everything negative I said about Pyro and throws it out the window. I love the Dragon's Fury. It extends his range a little so people can't just hold S and kill you. It gives Pyro an option to 2-tap classes very quickly, giving him an actual chance against combat classes at close range that can aim. It still allows him to reflect projectiles, lets him melt sentries, and gives him crowd control. This weapon just pushes the race between Pyro and Spy from being very close to not even close. Very easy to aim, and you can take on fully overhealed heavies with this thing. It's insane. For me, Spy's viability depends on the other team's awareness, just gives him a variable in terms of his viability. Plus, you can also stack a lot of Pyros but not Spies. Pyro has just too many things over Spy for Spy to be better than him. So, I'm sorry little bud, but you're last. You're still one of my favorite classes to play though, and I'm not saying that if you play Spy you're terrible or being a hindrance to the team. It's just compared to the other 9, Spy is unfortunately last because of what he brings to the table isn't really up to par with what he does in competitive. But yeah guys, let me know what your lists are down below, or if you have different placements than me. I'm genuinely curious to see what you guys come up with, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and sub. Again, almost at 3K, so it would mean a lot. Peace out, Girl Scouts.